Hey there, welcome into the show. This is the San Francisco 49ers Report. Hope everybody out there is having a fantastic weekend. Niners-Bucks coming up on Sunday. Cannot wait for it. And if you've never watched one of our watch parties, we do an hour pregame show, then we do live play-by-play, audience interaction, instant reaction. We do a postgame show. We chop it up with the faithful. We do Super Chat giveaways where we give away autographed jerseys and customized 49ers Report footballs. It's the best place to experience a Niners game day outside of being at the actual game. So hopefully I convince you with that sales pitch to join us on Sunday, Week 10, Niners on the road against the Buccaneers. The show begins at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Acoustic night with the $10 Super Chat. I like the profile picture right there, my man, because it looks like you're on a hike. I love hiking, and that is a beautiful backdrop right there. Looked like you had a good time. As for your question, let's have a good time with that. I think a lot of people are expecting Christian McCaffrey to have the production of last year, but I think that we should take care of him and not overuse him, at least for his first real action game. Now, a couple of interesting things on this front, right? The Niners opened up his practice window this week. He's been responding well, no pain after practicing. Richard Sherman had said on his podcast, I heard it from the horse's mouth, that McCaffrey's feeling good. He's ready to go. If the Niners were to have a game last week, he could have played, and he expects Christian McCaffrey to have a pretty sizable workload. But what did the Niners do last year? Did McCaffrey have a special year? He was the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. He was tied for first in touchdowns with 21. He had more than 2,000 all-purpose yards. But Kyle Shanahan even admitted that Christian McCaffrey is one of his own worst enemies last year because he refused to come off the field. The guy loves ball. He grew up with the father who was a Super Bowl champion and an All-Pro. And his father went to the lengths of great detail when McCaffrey was in high school, where if he got tackled by his jersey, grounded. Had to go to bed at a certain time every single night. Didn't wear jeans on game days because they would make his legs tired. Would have to wear shades and not squint because it would take away from his energy. The dude lives and breathes football, and it's very special. But he has to understand the big picture here. The Niners have to understand the big picture. They signed him to a contract extension through 2027. They upped his average annual value. They gave him guaranteed money. We're talking about not just one Achilles issue, an Achilles issue in both legs. And so the Niners have to manage his workload a little bit, and they can afford to do that. In previous years, they haven't had a backup back. They do now. Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerendo, they can play. And so I'm with you, especially for this game against Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay has struggled in covering the pass, and they're banged up at corner. And so San Francisco could rely on Brock Purdy in the pass game on Sunday. Shane Kirshner, $10 Super Chat. Hey, Chase. Hey, Shane. Do you think that Purdy can have a day throwing for over 300 yards and at least 3 touchdowns with the Bucs secondary being injured? And, you know, I referenced it moments ago, but let's expand on that. And thank you so much for the $10 donation. Brock Purdy this year has been kind of up and down. When you look at his numbers, touchdown-interception ratio, not great. He's completing under 65% of his passes. He's also had to deal with a lot of different moving parts. We've seen at times that he's been able to maximize his teammates and play really good ball. We've seen him struggle against some really good defenses. Minnesota and Kansas City. All quarterbacks have bad games. I think that Brock Purdy, since he became the Niners starter, is like a top 10 guy in the league. Is he elite to the level of Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen? No. And those guys are a lot freakier athletically, but he's a really good player, and he's capable of carrying this Niners offense, especially against a team in the Buccaneers who he's had success going up against in the past against Todd Bowles types of defenses. Now, Todd Bowles is a good defensive mind, but this year, the Buccaneers all across the board have been a bottom 5, bottom 10 defense, especially against the pass. And yes, they are banged up in that secondary. Juan, when healthy, should John Feliciano immediately replace Jake Brendel? He's been looking even worse than Colt McKivitz. You know what's crazy? I agree that Jake Brendel isn't really a high-level starting center in this league. That's an area where I want to see the Niners get better next offseason. He's just a little bit too small. When he has to go up against the likes of Chris Jones, it's just such a large gap in talent and ability. He hasn't given up a sack this year, though. Him and Dominic Puni have not given up a sack. So with that being said, I think what the Niners envision Feliciano's role being is their sixth offensive lineman, a player who can play left guard. He did that last year. He could play center. He did that with the Giants a couple of years ago. He could play right guard. He was the starting right guard for this team in the Super Bowl. And so he can play 3 of the 5 offensive line spots, and it's valuable to have a guy like that. If Aaron Banks continues to struggle, though, Feliciano being at left guard would not surprise me. T-Mac, do you think the bad start of the season falls more on Kyle or on Brock Purdy? It's a good question. I think ultimately it falls on the coach, because when you have a 14-point lead against the Rams in the second half, you have to manage the game better. You can't blow that lead. When you are leading big time at halftime and you had a Nick Bosa pick around midfield and a Diamador Lenore scoop and score on a blocked field goal against the Cardinals, and you're up double digits, yet you don't score in the second half, that's on the coach. When that Cowboys game starts to get very dicey, that's on coaching. I actually think it was more on Nick Sorensen. How is CD Lamb so open? And so has Brock Purdy been as good as he was last year? No. Has he been truly elite? No. In moments, has he been very good? No doubt about it. Can he be better? Yeah, and he needs to be if the Niners want to fulfill their potential this year. So both need to be better. Kyle Shanahan hasn't done a great job with red zone play calling and execution. Brock Purdy could also be better in the red zone, although the lack of efficiency on first down and the lack of good offensive line play, especially in that red area, hurts him. And so, football is rarely one thing or one person to blame. There are 11 players on the field at one time. And just to speak to the nuances of football, last week I'm watching Cowboys-Falcons, and on a 4th down, Mike McCarthy tried to run a jet sweep to CD Lamb, and he got tackled for a loss. And Greg Olsen made a good point of how the defender was able to get to CD Lamb just because of the fact that he was in a 2-point stance instead of a 4-point stance. And if he was in a 4-point stance, he couldn't have gotten out to CD Lamb. But because he was in a different stance or he was more upright, he was able to tackle CD Lamb. So sometimes football is decided razor-thin margins, such nuances and complexities of the game, and you can't often just blame one person, because the offensive line can be better. Deebo Samuel can be better. The defense has had so many breakdowns. I don't love the coaching. I haven't loved the scheme. Nick Bosa leads the NFL in pressures. He's been bad at tackling, and he hasn't generated sacks. Leonard Floyd is having a down year. And so there are so many things that go into it. Hugo de Jesus, if we lose to any more NFC teams, it's going to be tough to make the playoffs. If that happens, are we rebuilding? I don't think it's a rebuild. I think it's a reset. And for San Francisco also, think about how much football they've played, having gone to 4 NFC titles and 2 Super Bowls over the last 5 years. I mean, you're playing deep into January or February, and you have shorter off seasons with an aging roster. I actually think it could serve the Niners well in a way if they have some more rest. Now, do you have to rebuild? I don't think so. Think about this draft class. Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, Dominic Pooney, Isaac Arenda, Renardo Green, Malik Mustafa. Good players right there. Brock Purdy's still young. Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, they're still young and under contract. Diamador Lenore, if you re-sign him, that'll be his first non-rookie deal. And so you still have a lot of young players on your team. Jair Brown, he'll be going into year 3. And so I don't think it's a rebuild. I think it could be a reset. Do you have to make some changes? Yeah, maybe. Do you get rid of a Kyle Juszczyk because of that cap hit? Do you get rid of a Deebo Samuel because his production's gone down and he's been injured a lot? Yeah, that could happen. Do you make a difficult decision elsewhere in which you decide to let go of a player? There could be changes made. I don't think it's rebuilding. I think it's a reset or retool, and I think that that's a little bit different. The notorious Gav. How much will Chris Kosaric improve the new defensive tackle Davis? Yeah, so Khalil Davis, 28 years old, He's like 315, 320 pounds the last 2 years. He's been a pretty good rotational defensive tackle, and he's going to continue to be a rotational defensive tackle. I think why the Niners like him at that size, 4.75, 40-yard dash in the pre-draft process. So he's explosive, has short area quickness and explosion, and a good get-off. And Kosaric, he can maximize the heck out of defensive linemen. John Wallace, my worries are Colton McKivitz and Kyle being pass happy too soon. I saw some people in the comments section this week saying, I want the Niners to pass more. No. Look, you think about the Detroit Lions, right? They have the number one scoring offense in the NFL. Jared Goff is playing at an MVP level. They run the ball more than 50% of the time. The Philadelphia Eagles, during their 4-game winning streak, are running it 60% of the time. I think when the Niners are like 50-50, even 52-48, run, pass, that's when they play their best football. And how do you help out a struggling offensive line, John? Run the football. Colton McKivitz isn't a bad run blocker. He's not a good pass blocker. But you give that offensive line momentum, swagger, confidence, a feeling of domination because they can beat up the opposition by running it, getting physical, getting out in space, laying some pancakes on some pull blocks. That's how you help out that offensive line, which then sets up the pass game. So I agree. Kyle Shanahan can't get too pass happy. And this offense has been a little bit different as compared to previous years, where he has thrown it a little bit more. Less under center, more shotgun. Be sure to hit that subscribe button here on the show. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in, especially during this mailbag, because it's always good to hang out and talk some Niners football with all of you.